Angel Fall. Ward 3 barricaded, 3 officers down. Infected spreading to first floor. 5 officers down. Requesting weapon servitors. Main doors breached. Attempts to block River Bridge. Infected attempting to breach the Hab Block district. Sergeant Winthrop pushed his cap back and wiped the sweat from his brow. "Thank you," he said to the Vox officer, who saluted and stepped away. Winthrop pulled the cap down low again and stepped to the marshal's side. "We don't have spare constables to send," he said quietly, though both of them already knew it. "We're Adeptus Arbites, not line infantry." His voice carried bitterness more than complaint. Marshal Henrik Voss winced at the truth of it. He knew. He had known. He'd argued the point with Archmagos Sensorax Centauri the moment it became clear this wasn't a riot or a panic, but something far, far worse. But Centauri's calculating mind had no room for panic. Before sealing herself behind the blast doors of her invasion bunker, she issued a final decree. No troops were to enter Trinova. Not from outside, not from orbit, not even from the other side of the river. Magos Logi Serena had supported her with cold logic. Stage 3 infected, so-called Trinova malady hosts, became carriers. How or why, no one could yet say. But deploying the armed forces of Grimness into the city could, if Centauri was right, increase the infection rate, not reduce it. Voss had to respect the logic, even as he loathed the outcome. He had just ordered his constables to gun down Southside Arbites officers who charged their checkpoint, howling and mutated, one with an extra arm bursting from his back. There would be no reinforcements. The solution was clear. Lock down the city, seal all bridges, deploy regiments to the perimeters and eliminate anything trying to escape, infected or not. Withdraw the orbital tether to the moon. Nothing gets off-world. Trinova was quarantined by annihilation. Voss looked out over the tactical display, its lumen-laced grid now half obscured by red zones and loss-of-contact glyphs. "They left it to us," he said, mostly to himself. He squared his shoulders and turned to Winthrop. "Then we stop it here, or we bury it here. But this ends inside Trinova." Voss looked over the tactical screens. They showed anarchy across his city. Grimness had always been a hive world steeped in order, a finely balanced caste system, obedient citizens, decades of peaceful law-keeping. Now the screens showed its people tearing each other apart, snarling, clawing, devouring. His constables held their ground with riot shields and bolt pistols, the most powerful weapons they had. It wasn't enough. His chest felt tight. He had failed his duty. The Forge world had been in decline for decades. The Orc War had stripped their navy of escorts, leaving merchant haulers to be slaughtered by raiders. Now they relied on the Navis Astra Wigathane from distant NihtWyrtha to guard their own shipping lanes. The war had bled their army dry. A planet with 7 hive cities had barely survived the Ulgarith conflict. And now the capital, the city of his birth, was dying in front of him. A hand landed gently on his shoulder. "My day watch are fully kitted," said Sergeant Winthrop. "Right now, the Sanctum Medicae Trinova is the epicenter of the infection. We either retake it, or we cut it off." Voss turned to look at him. The man was steady, but shaken. In 30 years of knowing him, Voss had never seen him look so crushed. He leaned over the map, his eyes scanning streets, bridges, sector grids. Not as a marshal, as a constable. "This isn't war," he told himself. "This is a riot, and I've dealt with riots before." He adjusted his cap, planted his hands on the edge of the table, and pointed sharply at the map. "The Watling Street Manufactorum is in flames. The infected can't move east. The fire cuts them off from the workshops." Winthrop nodded. "We've got armed volunteers from the Cobblers Guild holding Queensberry Bridge and Vine Bridge." He traced a finger along the river and tapped a junction. "And the lads at the Imperial Mint blew the Grav Trestle tram bridge this morning. Nothing gets across from the West Forge." Voss nodded. "Good men." He moved his finger again. "That means the infected have only 3 routes left to spread. The Macro Cannon Works, the Barclays Square Manufactorum, and this bridge, Fleet Bridge." He thumped the spot beneath their command wagon. Then he stood upright. "Vox!" The cabin door creaked open, and the Vox officer ducked inside. "Order Sergeant Tremaine to take his City Force lads and reinforce the militia at the cannon works. Then get Sergeant Thomas to move his Crescent Place boys to support Sergeant Trent's squad at Barclays Square." The Vox officer hesitated. "Sir, Sergeant Trent died 10 minutes ago." Vos didn't blink. "Who's his lieutenant?" Winthrop answered before the Vox officer could. "Peels, detective, transferred from Shaft Field Hive last month. Good man, acted as sergeant during the park food riots." Vos nodded slowly. "Very well, he's in command now." Then he turned back to Winthrop. "And your constables will hold this bridge." Winthrop looked at him hard. "And you, sir?" Vos stepped down from the back of the command wagon, boots crunching on cobbled stone. He looked toward the burning silhouette of the Sanctum Medicae Trinova, rising like a shrine to death across the water. "Me, Winthrop," he said, voice quiet but clear. "We don't have any artillery left, but beneath the Medicae is an arc reactor, enough plasma stored down there to end this problem in one go." The upper floors of Sanctum Medicae Trinova flickered between ruin and shadow. Some windows glowed green, others were dark voids. Flames tinted with sickly emerald licked at the fortress hospital's spires, casting sharp Gothic silhouettes into the smoke-hung sky. The great structure loomed like a sanctified tomb. Across the riverbank and bridge, wounded patients staggered, weeping and screaming. Some were half-bandaged, others collapsed mid-step, convulsing in the dust, their faces twisted, not just with pain, but with madness, confusion, or worse. A lone Orders Hospitaller sister moved among them, stopping each to examine wounds with clinical speed. Every third or fourth patient, she would silently draw aside. Two Fraterist Templars, gleaming in once pure white armor now bathed in green firelight, stepped forward. They dispensed the Emperor's peace with quiet efficiency. Winthrop shouted to his constables, voice hoarse, "Shore up the barricade. Dog watch. Hurry the wounded." A massive explosion tore through the city's eastern bank. The shockwave raced down the river channel, slamming into the barricade with bone-rattling force. Constables were thrown off their feet. A cart used to brace the forward line was flung aside. Dust and blood filled the air. The dead building on the far bank released its charge, a horde, shuffling and snarling, now closing the distance toward the gap. Marshal Voss turned instinctively. In the distance, a dull afterglow lit the skyline. He remembered vaguely that the Devotion had been moored somewhere in that vicinity. The shuttle that had crashed earlier, perhaps it had done more damage than expected. Not that it mattered now. The barricade was broken, and the enemy was coming. He scanned the chaos, spotting Winthrop, blood running from his temple, pressing a rag to his head while still shouting orders. Vos touched his own face, wet, blood. His eardrums were blown. Muffled chaos surrounded him. He stepped beside Winthrop, placed a firm hand on the man's shoulder, and leaned close. He mouthed his words slowly and clearly. "Hold this bridge. I'm taking the sewers." Winthrop stared at him, then nodded. "Good luck, Henrik." He reached for a salute, then stopped. Instead, he held out his hand. Vos shook it firmly and then turned. He flagged down the flying squad, 5 constables, fully armored, armed with a flamer and combat shotguns. Without a word, they followed him toward the embankment. A manhole cover was being pried open. Winthrop turned back to the barricade, pulling the last of the fleeing civilians through. The Hospitaller sister and her Templars were the last to cross. She turned and called after the marshal. "Where is he going?" Winthrop didn't look back. "Into the sewers." She considered this, then gave a quiet order. Her 2 Templars followed the marshal, descending after him. "He'll need all the Emperor's help," she said. Then she took her place at the barricade beside Winthrop, reloading her weapon in the firelight. The horde was coming. A mass of twisting, shambling figures, their boil-covered skin glistening, eyes burning with unnatural light. The infected flooded out of the Sanctum Medicae Trinova, spilling onto the bridge like a breaking wave, rushing toward the city with mindless fury. Then, as if the world itself understood what was at stake, the invasion siren began to wail. Winthrop didn't know who had triggered it. It seemed like an afterthought, late, meaningless, but it echoed over the burning hive with a deep, keening howl, a sound heard only in the darkest of crises. The infected hit the barricade. They clambered over carts and sandbags, shrieking. Constables fired into the mass. Every few shots dropped 1, but for every corpse that fell, 5 more surged forward. Each volley bought only seconds. Winthrop stepped back to reload, shouting over his shoulder for more ammunition, and saw movement on the low path beside the embankment. Out of the gloom came Alpha Braylon, stride confident despite the burn marks and soot covering her ruined armor. Beside her was Calculus Logifexian, robes scorched, optics blinking furiously. Behind them trudged Dornstall and a handful of River Patrol survivors. Their uniforms were soaked and half-burned, but they still had weapons. Winthrop allowed himself a breath of relief. From the side streets came more shapes, a detachment of day-night watch constables, a platoon of workers' militia, even a few dock serfs with pistols, led by an adept wielding a vintage Mechanicus grav pistol. Maybe, just maybe, they had enough men to hold. Winthrop waved Dornstall over. The constable moved to the ammunition cart, marked with the sigil of the Barclays Square Manufactorum, and pried it open. He loaded his pistol, pocketed 2 spare magazines, then hauled a large crate off the back. Braylon took the other side of the crate. Together, they jogged it to the front line. Fexian followed, carrying 2 crates, one under each arm. Behind him, the rest of River Patrol carried ammo, shotguns, bolters, whatever they had salvaged. Dornstall took a place beside Winthrop and raised his weapon. "Sorry we're late," he said, firing a round that took an infected in the throat. "Ran into a problem on the river. Never found Astalin." Winthrop downed another and grunted. "He's probably dead." Braylon climbed up beside them atop the barricade cart. She fired twice, dropping 2 climbers, then hacked clean through a claw that reached for Winthrop's chest. "No," she said flatly. "The way he jumped off that bridge, he's a survivor. He's out there somewhere." She swept her bloodied Sikhs across the skyline, the city burning behind it. Winthrop gave her a side glance. "Poor bastard. Hope he doesn't get eaten. That would be terrible." Dornstall reloaded and stepped back up. "I know. I was looking forward to handing him to the executioner myself." At the barricade base, Fexian moved like a machine, mechadendrites and servo limbs passing ammo crates and loading magazines. The Mechanicus adept from the Manufactorum passed him and gave a quick salute before climbing into the fray with his militia. "How long are we expected to hold?" Fexian called up. "This is a holding action. We cannot defend this bridge indefinitely." Winthrop called down without looking. "The Marshal's taken the sewers. He plans to overload the Trinova arc reactor." Dornstall followed his gaze. The Sanctum Medicae still loomed, its windows leaking infected like pus from a wound. They poured from its gates, out of shattered windows, and across the bridge in waves. Dornstall exhaled. He ran a thumb along the edge of his pistol. They didn't have much time. The workers from the macro cannon foundry, still in their burn-stitched overalls and clutching mismatched weapons, were the first to go. One moment they held the line, firing black powder pistols and scrap-built lasguns. The next, they were pulled down, dragged screaming beneath the weight of a dozen clawed hands. One adept fired his grav pistol wildly before his face vanished beneath a tide of flesh. Another tried to climb the barricade in retreat and never made it. Then a constable was caught, a veteran of the day watch, still wearing his reinforced riot helm. He screamed once as something latched onto his leg, twisted, and pulled him down into the crush. His shotgun roared point blank, but he didn't rise again. Braylon turned to fire. So did Winthrop. That's when they heard it. A deep, metallic groan, like pistons being torn from their sockets. Something was moving through the horde, a commotion rippling from behind. Even the infected hesitated, their heads twitching, eyes rolling madly. Then the shape burst through. It was a mass of servitors, cart-pulling labor units, bound together by twisted harnesses, metal frames bolted into meat. 6 of them at least, maybe more, their bodies fused by rusted scaffolds and wrapped chains, still bearing the cargo traces of delivery carts. But they weren't carts anymore. They were one creature, a charging fist of muscle, servos, and screaming wet logic. "God chain!" someone cried. It slammed into the barricade like a wrecking ram. The entire line buckled. Sandbags and wooden carts exploded outward. A breach opened, wide and gaping. The infected poured through, and the creature hit exactly where the Sister Hospitaller stood. Her bolter cracked once, twice, then she was lost beneath the surge. The Fraterus Templars roared and lunged forward, trying to reach her. Too late. They were torn apart, white armor vanishing beneath green-lit claws. "Fall back!" Winthrop bellowed, grabbing the shoulder of a retreating constable. The line collapsed. The constable's militia and workers turned, some fleeing across the bridge, others caught mid-stride. Winthrop, Braylon, Dornstall, and Fexian fell back to the ammunition cart. It was the only solid structure left. "Here!" Winthrop shouted. "Hold here! We make our stand!" They formed a tight circle. Fexen slammed a crate shut, his mechadendrites lashing out, ripping infected apart even as one lunged at him. He yanked back an adept, the one from the barricade, dragging the man behind him. Braylon was already bloodied. Her Sikhs flashed, cutting down 1, 2, 3 enemies in a blur. Her rifle was gone, shattered. Her face was pale, and one arm hung useless. Dornstall had fallen. Something slashed his side, knocking him to the cobbles. Winthrop hauled him up by the collar. "You're not dying here," he hissed, shoving a pistol into the man's hands. Back to back, they fired into the swarm, shot after shot. Claws raked the crates, screams rose around them. Fexian's mechadendrites sparked, his augmetics shorting as systems failed one by one. Dornstall fired blindly, blood in his eyes. Braylon was on one knee, her Sikhs lost beneath the tide of limbs and teeth. Winthrop reloaded with trembling fingers. This is it. This is where we die. Then the sound came. Not a voice, not a cry. A scream from the sky, the sound thunder would make if it could feel pain. Like the Emperor himself had drawn a blade across the heavens and cut the air in half. Then came the thunderclap, wrapped in the scream of rocket-breaking engines. The first Astartes drop pod slammed into the bridge. The impact alone crushed a dozen infected. Its deceleration jets roared, fire washing across the stone. Dozens more ignited, burning and flailing, or were hurled bodily into the river. Then a second pod crashed down, then a third. Thud, thud, thud! Bridge stones cracked. The barricade shuddered, even the horde hesitated. The void itself seemed to go still. There was a hiss as the drop pod doors detonated outward. Steam billowed. Inside, a pulse of green runes flickered, and then they stepped out. Astartes. The first moved with the gait of a stalking ghoul. Their armor was deep storm blue, edged in tarnished silver, ancient beyond years. Etched across their plates were runes, glowing ghostly blue in the firelight. Their pauldrons bore a skull, carved from ghost-forged crystal, flickering with eerie inner light. Their helm lenses were green, cold and watchful. They did not speak. They advanced through the smoke, stepping over corpses like rubble, gods of the battlefield. Dornstall blinked. His eyes refused to accept what he saw. These aren't loyalists, he thought. They can't be. They looked like Chaos Astartes, things from legends meant to frighten children. Flaming skull emblems, blades wreathed in light, armor scorched and inscribed with dead languages, not one icon of the Imperium in sight. One bore a bolter shaped like a warg's head, its muzzle smoking. Another moved with a power sword and pistol. A third hefted a power axe, its haft etched in shimmering oath script. A fourth, clad in light blue plate, held a staff. He paused, then extended his hand toward the horde. Green witchfire erupted, consuming dozens. The one with the bolter planted his feet, firing round after round. Each shot blew an infected apart, limbs spinning into the air. The axe-wielding revenant stepped forward, swinging once. 3 infected vanished in gore, their remains tossed like paper. The swordsman waded into the crowd, cleaving and firing, a whirlwind of precision and death. Dornstall wiped his face, ash streaking across his skin. He took a long, deep breath. The Void Revenants had arrived.